Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a news update video for the 30th of January 2023. Let's get straight to the overnight news, and the first place I go to, as ever, are the Ukrainian figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the caveats, propaganda, accuracy, Russia don't produce the same sort of figures, so on and so forth. The figures are a lot less than previously, quite considerably so. This could be because it's a Sunday. I know it's Monday today, but the figures were compiled on a Sunday. That might have something to do with it. It could be that just, there wasn't so much going on in certain areas of the front line. It was a fairly quiet news yesterday in some respects. 490 liquidated personnel, so that's below average. 4 tanks, 3 APCs, well below what it has been. 1 artillery system, no aircraft. So I have told you that there's been so many aircraft and helicopters hit that it's been over the last sort of previous 5 days or so. It's the same amount of aircraft and helicopters that have been taken out in the previous 6 weeks. So you can see the high number there. There are some claims that that's down to the Vuhledar area, that there's a lot of air support there, also Bakhmut area as well. But there is, again, no evidence that these have been taken out, which is kind of what you'd expect, given that they would fall behind enemy lines if they are air support aircraft. So it's going to be unlikely that you see aircraft used in those combined arms activities that are sitting behind the front lines, shooting their missiles at the front lines. You aren't going to see, like, the Russians aren't going to release videos of their own aircraft taken down, but it would be great to see some evidence nonetheless. 4 vehicles and fuel tanks. So really a much quieter day on the statistics front. Let's move to Iran first, because there's been lots of sort of rumors, lots of claims, lots of activity going on concerning Iran. Still no proof other than the drone attack filmed on a drone factory, but it does seem as though Russia's supply of killer UAVs may be slowed up for a while at least. And this is the idea that a political expert in Israel says that 14 targets were hit in Iran overnight. This was the night before. Doron Peskin claims, as well as drone factories, the HQs of both the Revolutionary Guard and the Quds Force were also hit. In addition, Peskin says other defense industrial facilities were targeted. So this is, and although Iran has said, oh, they're no problem, and produced some photographs to show that there were no issues, they were very selective by all accounts, and in fact, there were some pretty bad damage done to these facilities that were hit. As Barak Ravid says here, the new strike on Iran's MOD facility in Isfahan was, quote, specific, surgical, and successful, sources with direct knowledge told me. They added the facility was connected to Iran's missile program, quote, 4 different areas of the building were accurately targeted, and the goal was achieved. So Iran saying, no problem. Those intelligence sources who apparently know what they're talking about, of course, is unverified, saying there was specific damage done and the goal was achieved. So, take your pick. Now, the initial thought I had was exactly this, right? If it was Israel, as everyone seems to believe, and if Iran's drone and ballistic missile facilities have been seriously damaged, as appears to be the case, that's worth a hell of a lot more than 14 tanks. So Israel has been rather standoffish with regard to supplying Ukraine directly with munitions. Okay, there've been some assistance offered in terms of maybe strategic assistance of how to do X, Y, and Z. Long term, I don't know, thinking. But as far as actual hardware goes, Israel has been somewhat lacking in their support. However, if they are behind this hit, which is seems to be at least partially a hit on the missile factories and the drone factories that are providing Russia with the missiles and drones that are attacking Ukraine, then this could be more meaningful than a whole bunch of tanks that are being promised to Ukraine by any given country. I mean, this could be supremely important if it was Israel. Okay, and there's a lot of ifs involved in that. Louise Mensch, who's a former former UK politician, actually, Conservative politician, says it wasn't Israel. But if it's not Israel, then who is it? I don't think that there would be the kind of internal capability of any entity within Iran that could do that. So therefore, you are thinking international players. Well, if it's not Israel, it's going to be the US. Like, what are the options here? So my thoughts are probably is Israel, but it's really risky that. Whew. So explosions are reported in headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran. A bunch of videos showing further destruction caused, and that was from last night, or at least the videos came out last night. So when they refer to, I'm slightly unsure, but yeah, certainly Iran has been hit. Okay. This has been a bit of a backwards and forwards. Initially, when the announcement for Abrams tanks was heralded, there was the idea that it was going to take an awful long time for those Abrams to get there to Ukraine. Then it was kind of leaked or released or whatever that the Abrams are going to be there by, as soon as possible, March, April time. And now, according at least to the Washington Post, it's going to be the end of this year, perhaps 2024. Of course, that's a really long-term project rather than providing Ukraine with the capability to do a really effective counter-offensive in late spring. It doesn't surprise me. It's a difficult thing to get Abrams, not just people trained on Abrams, but all the logistics, trains, planned and sorted out. So that doesn't surprise me. It's just a bit of a shame because you think in these terms of ideals. Talking about tanks, Ukrainian tankers have arrived in the UK on an RAF tanker to train. I think tanker is probably the wrong word here. To train on British Army Challenger 2 tanks. So this is the kind of opposite to that. I mean, the Challengers were offered first in terms of the main battle tanks, so you would expect to see the organisation for that sorted out first. Really good. The idea is that these are going to be, you might see them on the front lines or in Ukraine by the end of March. If you think we're just entering February, so that's brilliant. You also you want these guys to get the adequate training. You don't want it so rushed that they're not getting adequate training, so on and so forth. Staying on tanks, Switzerland should pass on mothballed tanks. Politicians from the left and the right support the sale of Swiss Leopard tanks. They could close gaps in Poland or Germany in the provision of such tanks. Switzerland is the focus of a lot of attention with regard to what they're doing in terms of their sort of military exports and in the context of their neutrality. So that would be pretty cool if that could happen. But whether it will, I don't know. It looks a bit of a long shot to me. 180 jet fighters worth $30 billion are needed to close the skies in Ukraine. This is from the Defense Express. Air Force Speaker Yuri Ihnat said that for reliable protection in the Ukrainian sky, in addition to air defense, it's necessary for at least 5 brigades in every 3 squadrons. Not sure about the language there, but the idea is that Ukraine want to shed a load of planes, and you would understand, of course they do. Are they going to get them? Highly unlikely they'd get 180 fighters, but a set of F-16s would be super useful. I believe the next Ramstein is going to be about air support. Oh no, not there. I thought I had another source talking about that, but there is claims that the next Ramstein will be about the provision of air equipment. Keep an eye out for what goes on in that context. Right, Erdogan says Turkey may send a different signal to Finland's NATO membership that, quote, would shock Sweden. Ooh, so a bit of geopolitical shenanigans here. Turkey, if you remember, Turkey sort of said we're not going to support Sweden's accession to NATO because some guy came and burnt a Quran in a right-wing protest in Sweden, and they cancelled the Swedish Foreign Secretary, coming over, making a visit to Turkey. It all got pretty controversial. Then I did a report on, well, I didn't do a report. I was telling you about how it looks like Russia might have been behind at least the financing of the guy that went and burnt a Quran. So it's a bit more complicated than people might think. And actually, that story's been picked up by a few major outlets. I was listening to it on Ukraine, the latest podcast. They were talking about it. Yeah, so it could be that Russia is stirring, poking the hornet's nest there and running away and seeing all the damage it does. Politically speaking, it is quite a lot of damage from that one incident. However, Turkey might, again, trying to play both sides, might go and give ratification to Finland's accession as a kind of two fingers up to Sweden. Say, look, Sweden, if you're going to mess around with the Quran and you're going to mess around, trying to annoy Turkey, then we won't let you join NATO. But Finland, fine. And that causes, further tensions and whatnot. But I think that's quite an interesting development. Okay, Kerch Bridge still appears to have big holes in it, and that's a good thing. So this is a Sentinel-2 satellite image from the 23rd. So the 23rd is pretty much exactly a week ago, and you can see that there are two holes in the Kerch Bridge. That they are still some way from repairing it in its totality. That is good news for the logistics and for we heard yesterday that Ukraine hit a bridge just around Melitopol, between Melitopol and Tokmak. So logistics are still your number one priority really for HIMARS hits. In fact, speaking of that, I might bring the next thing. Yeah, here we are. Here it is. So let's bring this into play. So to speak about logistics, the railway station area got hit. So this is Ilovaisk, which is just to the east of Donetsk. Let's show you on the map. So here we have the map. Ilovaisk. It's a scene of a big massacre in 2014, actually. But this is where there is this kind of rail hub, and Ukrainians have hit that a number of times. They've hit it with fuel tanks in the station. Well, it looks like a similar scenario here as the station was hit, and well, here it says personnel and military equipment was targeted while being offloaded. I don't know whether fuel has also been hit. This is an RT video, but there's quite a fire that was resultant from the HIMARS hits on Ilovaisk. You do see some rail trucks there. I'm not really sure what was hit though. It looks behind that, but as I say, military and equipment, personnel and equipment. So we won't hear the details of exactly what was hit, probably, at least not from the Russians. Might hear sort of claims from the Ukrainians over the next few days. Okay. Tendar, lots of people have been reporting on this. It is hidden support like this which makes a difference on the battlefield. Aside from the tremendous military but also financial support, it's imperative to have a functioning logistics chain for repairs and having those repair factories working at 100%. So this is a Wall Street Journal report on a repair shop in Poland. Poland launches a large-scale repair operation for Ukraine, writes the Wall Street Journal. In the factory complex, hundreds of technicians are working around the clock to restore artillery and heavy armour for their subsequent return to the front line. In total, up to 10 Crab, so these are self-propelled guns, have been repaired in recent months, with already 3 are ready to be sent to the front. The last SPGs arrived in the worst possible condition. Quote, the whole barrel of the gun was missing. The hull was badly damaged, said one of the engineers. This is absolutely fantastic news. Really, there's loads of footage and photographs coming out of this place in Poland. They really are doing a good job at fixing up this stuff for the Ukrainians. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant. Okay, going back to this claim that the Ukrainians hit a hospital and 14 people died, and I reported on this yesterday. Just Sky News did a report on it or mentioned it. They didn't actually go into any details, sadly, but they said that Ukrainian attack on a hospital is, quote, almost certainly disinformation. And I showed you a few reasons why it seemed to be complete nonsense. It's not marked on a map. It wasn't there was no sign in any of the footage that came out that it was a hospital, and apart from this one kind of notice board that was entirely clean, not covered in rubble and dust and whatever, just propped up by the rubble. And it's like, yeah, this is a hospital. Really? And anyway, this is a hospital in Kherson that was hit by shelling. This is what it looks like when you hit a hospital, right? It's a pretty graphic picture there, and I apologize. But you've got actual hospital beds, actual hospital walls, actual hospital ceiling, high ceilinged hospital. That is, yeah, there you go. That's a hospital that's hit by shelling. You want to talk about war crimes? That looks fairly much like a war crime. So it does seem like the Russians yet again are trying to BS disinformation until they provide good evidence that was a hospital, which they haven't done. They make claims, they make assertions, and put like a notice board up or whatever it was, and say, look, it's a hospital. Like, really? And those claims only came out hours after the initial, as I mentioned yesterday, the first responders there didn't say anything about it being a hospital. The first report said nothing about it being a hospital. It was only hours later, once the disinformation cogs started whirring, that we heard it was actually a hospital. Yeah. Ukraine plans to become a member of the EU in the next 2 years. Already this year, preliminary negotiations on accession may take place. Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, said, or Shmyhal, not sure. Central question marks will be Ukraine's struggle against corruption. And this is a good thing about like organisations like the EU. Like, if you want to become a member of the EU, you have to pass this criteria, which are decent criteria for being a transparent democracy. I mean, the problem exists when you do pass those tests and then you do democratic backsliding like Hungary, with Viktor Orban closing down the press and shutting down transparency initiatives and closing down democratic institutions and mechanisms. Then what do you do? Then the EU tries withholds financing to Hungary, and it all becomes really problematic. But at least, to get in, and this is a whole thing around the time of Brexit, we're going to talk about Boris Johnson, but Boris Johnson said, you'll have 80 million Turks joining the EU. This is one of the things, I mean, my own father came and said, I'm going to vote against Brexit. This is horrible. I'm like, Turkey will not join the EU. Mark my words, Dad, you will not have 80 million Turks here next year. Lo and behold, we didn't have 80 million Turks. And it's how many years later? 6 years later. Do we have 80 million Turks? No. Why? Because they wouldn't have remotely passed these criteria. So Turkey do not have an open and free press. That's one of the criteria for accession. And they were never going to have that. They were never going to pass those tests. Certainly in a time frame. I mean, that's a 10-year project, and they're still, they're nowhere near that, and they're not going to join. So at least not in the foreseeable future. So these criteria in place, and they're useful for gauging who can join and who can't join, and what people need to do to join. And these are good things in place, and that you would hope that the really big challenge with Ukraine's corruption will there's a great incentive to sort that out, because if they don't sort that out, they ain't joining the EU. And this whole war seems to be about joining things like the EU and NATO and trying to be part of the Western liberal sort of world. So there you go. However, apparently Brussels has said, yeah, not so fast, as in, you might want to join within 2 years, but the likelihood of that actually happening as far as the EU is concerned might be somewhat less than you might think. Russians have switched to offensive operations, apparently, in the Limansky direction, reports the General Staff of Ukraine. Something that was already noticeable the last couple of days, with intensified counterattacks, for example, in Kreminna. Lots of reinforcements arrived from Rubizhne. This is the idea that it looks like, as things look quite tough for the Ukrainians in certain places, that's because actually Russia are switching things to an offensive mindset, arguably. And this is coming from the General Staff themselves. We will see how that develops. Just a few more things here. Ukraine. Boris Johnson says that Putin threatened him with a missile strike. So this is classic Boris here in an interview. The bumbling Boris.
He said, Boris, you say that Ukraine is not going to join NATO anytime soon. He said it in English, anytime soon. What is any time soon? And I said, well, it's not going to join NATO for the foreseeable future. You know that perfectly well. Fundamentally, it wasn't about, he threatened me at one point and said, Boris, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile, it would only take a minute or something like that, jolly. But I think from the very relaxed tone that he was taking, the sort of air of detachment that he seemed to have, he was just playing along with my attempts to get him to negotiate.
So either here, Putin is sort of joking around saying, hey, we can take you out in a minute, just send a missile, or he's being deadly serious. So if he's being deadly serious, that is a threat, and this might underwrite why Boris Johnson was so strong at the beginning of the war in coming to Ukraine's aid. From a kind of personal point of view, he almost was going beyond maybe what the national position was. I don't know, I'm sort of speculating there. But if it's a joke, then that's the sort of joke that has a threat in it. Like, Putin's not your kind of funny ha-ha guy. There's going to be like, hey, we could send you a missile and it'll blow you up. Anyway, no, only joking. He's like, and we could send you a missile and we could blow you up in minutes. Like, okay, right. There's an air of sinister in that. There is a threat. It's almost like in vino veritas. The truth comes out in wine. When you're drunk, you say these silly things, ha ha ha, but actually you're letting the truth out. Well, here, this is the truth comes out in possibly in his attempt at humour, and that is, to me, either way, that's a threat. And if that's a threat, then Boris Johnson, that fully kind of goes, well, you can imagine it partly explains his response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This shit is serious, and I've spoken to Putin and don't like the cut of his jib. So yeah, interesting. Okay, and we go on to last couple of points. Russia is making money on energy sales, and why is that happening, and how do we change this? Euromaidan has written a report. Despite the oil cap, Russia makes 260 million euros on crude oil exports a day. I was reporting an article by Puck that was talking about how, and they were referring to other reports and the Russian budget itself, how Russia had budgeted for sort of $70 a barrel for Ural oil. They're now selling it for $30 to $40 a barrel. They are losing about 160 million euros a day. So while they're making 260 still, the price cap, I think, alone is losing them 160. So you can see that, okay, that's not half, but that's a good third plus. That, or two fifths maybe. This is that they're making a lot of money still, but they're also, that hides the fact that they're probably hurting quite a lot from things like the sanctions and the price cap. And when you add the price cap on other substances like diesel, some of the guesstimations are that they would lose a further 120 million euros a day. So that would be 280 million euros that they are not having, that they would have been budgeting for, that is built into their balance sheet in terms of what they're going to give to education, healthcare, whatever it is, that won't be there, and that will hurt the nation incredibly. So yes, they are still making a lot of money, but it's not nearly the amount they were making, and that's where the problem is. Now, what do you do about that other 260 million? Well, that will be being debated hotly around the world with Ukraine's allies. Anyway, there you go. Actually, the last one is just a map. So there you go. That's a map of Ukraine, just in case I haven't shown you that before. Thank you for watching this. I will now get on with the Frontline update. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for all your support and all your wonderful contributions in the comments thread. If you want to support the channel in another way, you can pop along to uasupporter.com/ATP. And with that /ATP, a little bit of commission goes to my my channel. So in this way, you can grab yourself some stuff that shows your support for Ukraine, and help the channel out. For example, you can get earphone cases, because everyone needs a case for earphones. Yeah, AirPod cases. There you go. Look at them. They look lovely. You can grab yourself a set of them, or one of them, or 19 of them. Anyway, thank you. Take care. Speak soon.